Chapter 9. Found in the Woods. Jimmy Allen was the last one up the next morning. Having once fallen asleep, after tossing for some time in his bed, he slept soundly. Meanwhile, Callie and Dottie Clinton had come together again to bring the milk. "I guess you dropped this in the woods, didn't you?" asked Callie, handing Penny a mesh bag from which she had brushed the mud and wet leaves that had been clinging to it. "I cleaned it off the best I could. We went off the trail a little as we came along and saw a bit of white in a clump of aspens. It turned out to be this handkerchief, and then a bit of this bag showed. The leaves had got drifted over it. We didn't open it. It looked as if it had been there quite a while." Penny took and examined the bag. It was a beautiful thing, or would have been in good condition. "This isn't ours," she said. "Some tourist or camper or someone who lives here in the summer must have lost it." Penny held out the bag to Callie, who shook her head decidedly. "You keep it." "Well, okay, if you'd rather. I could put an ad in the paper, if you think it would do any good. It does look like an expensive bag." She tossed it on the table. The decision at breakfast was to explore the woods first, then to take a ride on the lake, taking a picnic lunch with them. In good spirits, the four Allens started on the trail. As they passed the cabin, Jimmy was reminded of his strange experience of the night before. To Phil, he said, "Say, I thought someone was prowling around last night and went all through the cabin to see if it was all right." "What made you think someone was about?" asked Philip. "Oh, there were sounds. I fell asleep in the chair in front of the fire and woke up almost frozen and thought I heard something." "Did anyone leave the study window open?" "Sure. Don't you remember Penny said it was stuffy and we told you to shut it if you got chilly? I was so close to the fire and out of the draft, I suppose, that I never thought of it again. I pushed my chair back afterward, and my back was partly toward the alcove." Philip did not pay much attention to what Jimmy was saying, but Jimmy had found out what he wanted to know. His visitor, if he had had one, and he was sure he had, of flesh or of spirit, was not responsible for the raised window, though the visitor might have come and gone through it. They spread out through the woods, not following the trail, though keeping an eye out for its direction. The woods were comparatively open for some distance. Then came a dense, thickly wooded portion, the primitive forest, Phil thought. He had heard his uncle say how fortunate he had been to find a bit of land that had neither been cleared nor burned over. After some time of exploration, the party rested at the edge of the woods where the lake swept up to the land at no great distance. Further along there seemed to be a clearing with a few scattered houses or barns. Then came forest again. "I think," said Philip, glancing at a paper which he took from his pocket, "that our place stops here, but goes back in the direction we just came from. That wire fence we found probably shows the separation between our woods and the one somebody else owns. Pat will know. It's all on the deed, of course. Now let's strike back and go to the limit on the side opposite the lake. That will bring us up to our nearest neighbor, about a mile away." "Do you mean that you own all that, Phil? A whole mile?" asked Marjorie. "Heck no. I wish I did. But the wood is uninterrupted, and it will be fun to go through it. I really want to find certain landmarks shown on this paper I found in the desk." Accordingly, after their rest on the shore, the Allens started toward the south. "This is a pretty nice wood, Phil," Marjorie remarked, after they had gone some distance. "In the spring, when all the birds come to nest, it's going to be wonderful." She and Philip were in the lead. Jimmy had fallen in with Penny and was telling her about his adventure of the previous night. When he had finished, Penny said, "Jim, I haven't said a word of this to anyone, but I think I saw the green lady too. Or at least the blue light." Yeah? How come you didn't let the rest of us in on it? Because I didn't want Margie to be scared. And besides, I wasn't really positive I saw anything. After hearing your story, though, I think we ought to investigate." "Agreed," replied Jimmy. "Only Phil didn't put much stock in my story when I told him just now. Still, together with yours, he might be convinced. You tell him, will you?" By this time, they had come within sight of their neighbor's residence. They did not even know his name. Anne Mary had neglected that bit of gossip, Penny said, though once she had started to tell her about the people who lived next door. But next door was some distance away, and up to this time the Allens had felt neither interest nor curiosity. Almost everybody had left the summer homes. Here, however, smoke was coming from a fire behind the house. Someone was burning underbrush or trash. There seemed to be some clearing going on, and the four looked over with great interest as they emerged from the deeper wood. They hesitated as Philip called to a man who was looking in their direction and now raised his hand to show that he saw them. Another man was raking some leaves toward the fire. "Excuse us for trespassing," said Philip, rapidly walking to meet the man and speaking as soon as he knew that he would be heard. "We have been exploring the woods, our own first, and so we just came on through. We are the Allens and live north of you, toward the lake. We only just came a few days ago, and it is all very interesting to us up here." "I've heard about you," said the man. "I presume you are anxious enough to preserve your own forest, and will be equally anxious to spare ours. Come through it all you like." "Have you seen any traces? Perhaps you have not heard how I lost my daughter." "Nothing in detail, sir," Philip answered. "We just heard that someone had wandered away from home and that a search had been made." "It's still going on. You did not meet anyone or see any sign of an exhausted young woman anywhere as you drove in? I've been thinking only today that I would go over and ask you to let me look through your cabin and the lodge, perhaps. I asked the rough fellow who has it in charge, and he told me to keep off." Philip could imagine Pat's reaction to such a request. Why should the man want to go through their house? However, he replied that he would be glad to receive a call, but he could not imagine why it would be of any advantage to look through any part of their buildings. "We've been all through the place," said Philip, "except the cabin, and Pat was staying there before he left for a few days on business. There can be no one at our place, sir. The reason I ask, I found a handkerchief of my daughter's near your boathouse. It is quite certain that she went toward the lake. What we fear is that she may have drowned. She was not quite herself, had been sick for some time and would be feverish and delirious, with a notion to get away from her nurse. We thought that the quiet here would benefit her, and we have lost her instead." "I am very sorry to hear it, Mr. Phil stopped. "Spencer is my name. I am not the owner of the place, but have a financial interest with the owner and arranged to be here this summer. I am staying in the hope of finding some clue, though a search is being made as thoroughly as possible in farther points that she might have reached. I will call to see if you have any information before I leave." There was little more said. Philip now introduced Penny, Jimmy, and Marjorie by name. Penny seconded Phil's invitation to call, and the Allens retreated to the forest again to find a shortcut home. "What did you think of our neighbor, Phil?" asked Penny as they walked along together. "Somehow I didn't like him much, though I'm sorry for him, of course. He looked pretty sinister, like the villain in an old melodrama." Penny laughed. "I don't think he looked much like the disconsolate father. He looked worried, though. Strange that he should ask to go through our lodge. Suppose he means to break in when we're away." "I don't suppose he needs to do any breaking in, Penny. Shall we take him through when he calls?" "I don't want to. Who in the world is he, anyhow? Let's find out something about who people are, Phil. Easy enough. Only the year-round inhabitants are here now, and it's a pity if we can't get a line on them all through Anne Mary and Pat. Pat may know about this fellow. He may have a reason for being a rough fellow with this man. In a short time, the family was home again. They came in at the rear of the house, stopping to go through the little cabin as they came. It was a beauty, Jimmy decided, and all agreed with him. There were 2 rooms and a bath. The living room had a fireplace and a compact kitchen arrangement in one corner that was partially walled off. The bedroom had 4 bunks in it. They decided it could house them if they ever turned the main house into a summer hotel. As they started to go into the lodge, Penny suddenly thought again of the gold bag the Clinton girls had found. Golly, Marjorie, we never looked inside of that bag. I tossed it on the table and forgot about it until now. Philip and Jimmy were considerably interested in hearing of the gold mesh purse. Possibly this man's daughter dropped it. It might be well to show it to him, said Philip. Odd. I never thought of it when we were talking to him, said Penny. I had such a queer feeling about that man. I don't like him one bit. It is hard to feel sorry for him. Isn't that wicked? Very, grinned Philip, but I don't like him myself. You feel somehow that he isn't very sincere. While he was saying this, he unlocked the kitchen door, and they all went in. There lay the gold bag on the table. Marjorie seized it and handed it to Philip, who promptly opened it. The purse was too flat for much to be inside. Philip drew out a small leather case containing a key and a $10 bill, damp but unhurt. There was a pocket for a card, but no identifying card was there. Several loose dimes were down in the depths of the lining, which was stained and wet from dew. Philip fished up a small gold pencil also. He felt inside again and found a tiny address book. That seemed like a find indeed, but when Philip opened it, he found all but a few pages torn out. There was, however, some writing on these, writing protected by the leather cover and quite easily read in spite of dampness. Listen, said Phil. If I die trying to get away and this is found, I want it to be put in the paper that the man who says he is my father is a stranger. Something is very wrong. I am dreadfully frightened now for fear I may be caught, but I shall get out some way, if only to the lake which I know is near. What it is, I do not know. I have been sick, but things will clear up if I can get away. Perhaps I can find a boat or someone will give me a lift in a car, though he will be after me and say that I am insane. Oh, what— Poor girl, cried Penny, with sympathy. Do you suppose she was right? Is it a case of kidnapping? What do you imagine happened? I think that she probably reached the lake, and that was the end of her if she did find a boat. I'll ask Pat when he comes back and show this to him. We won't show it to our neighbor yet. Maybe he is a rascal, and yet, on the other hand, he may be her father. I wonder how she happened to drop this. It was probably all the money she had. If we had read the description with which this man probably advertised for her, we might know what she had on and everything about her. Possibly Anne Mary has saved some paper, Penny. Ask her. This poor child was probably going to say, "Oh, what shall I do?" and gave the whole idea up in despair. She might have fallen into bad hands, too. She was certainly not safe running out into the woods. At night, I guess, too. I'll hide it, Philip, said Penny, as Philip handed everything to her. We can decide later what to do about it. Jimmy, who had been looking in the living room for the book he had been reading the night before, suddenly appeared in the doorway. Anybody seen the encyclopedia? I bet you put it away, Penny, the way you do. I left it right on the couch. No, on the table or chair. Jim, honest, I haven't touched that book. I want to read up on Michigan, too. Then Penny added in a low voice that only Jimmy could hear, "I suspect the green lady flew out the window with it." End of chapter 9.